Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Thursday, May 18th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things, because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our day by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. Today is the International Day for Women in Maritime. The day celebrates women in the maritime industry and is intended to promote the recruitment, retention, and sustained employment of women in this sector, raise the profile of women in maritime, strengthen the International Maritime Organization's commitment to the United Nations stated goal of gender equality, and support work to address the current gender imbalance in maritime. I personally haven't spent much time considering the maritime industry, let alone women in maritime, so I was interested to read a little bit about this international observance. I also enjoyed the IMO, or International Maritime Organization's logo and concept, which you can see if you're interested at the link that I've put in the video description. Humanity is an idea machine, and good ideas are all around us. So today I am going to chat with you about what has been on my mind more than usual for the last 24 hours, and that is, what am I doing with my life? Now, I probably ask myself this question more than most people, but I think it is pretty normal for people to wonder, or to just think day in, day out as they're maybe clocking in and out at a job, or, churning out spreadsheet after spreadsheet, PowerPoint presentation after PowerPoint presentation. Why am I doing this? And what is this going to amount to in the end? Thinking about what am I doing on like a grand scale. And like I said, I think about this more often than most, which is why in the past, or it's one reason why in the past I have had a problem with not being able to stick to one thing, because after I stick with something for a while, I start to think, my efforts could probably be more useful somewhere else. Or, this isn't really gaining traction, and, this isn't going to really make a big difference in the world, so I need to switch it up. I think this thing over here can make a much bigger difference. And that's a really, something I really have to check in myself, because as I have stated on previous episodes, and as I'm sure we all know by now, you cannot really make a lot of change. You can't really make a lot of progress without waiting a really, really long time, sticking with something, at least one thing for a really, really long time. And that is hard. I think it's harder for maybe creative people. I'm an artist and a graphic designer, and I get inspired by things I see, things I hear, and I get new ideas for new projects like almost every day. Especially this time of year when there's so much sunlight and it just gives me so much energy. But, right now what I'm trying to do is stick with what I'm currently doing for as long as I can. For the past couple years, I have been able to sort of adjust my approach to things so that I approach things in year-long chunks. So start a thing and try it for a year, at least. Maybe not with everything, but at least with a lot of things I can do that now. So what I'm going to try to do with this little, energy that I have right now, that is this little burst of energy that I have right now that's sort of going towards, my bigger life's picture, is I am just going to try to tweak everything that I am doing to sort of evoke more of that bigger life's purpose, or some of those bigger grand goals that I want to see. So for example, why am I talking to you? I am not a self-help guru. I am not, I like to read self-help books. I like to read a lot of books. I'm not an author, at least not yet, but I am a graphic designer. And, why am I not just like churning out logos right now or churning out poster designs? And the answer to that is that I think that there's already enough of that. I think that there are so many amazing, talented, artists and designers out there. Not that I don't enjoy making art and designing, but I wanted to add value. I wanted to approach my industry a little bit differently. So I decided to launch a graphic design agency that specializes in helping people who want to start either a charity, a nonprofit, or a business that is actively working to make the world a better place. And I know that sounds kind of vague, because doesn't everybody think that they are making the world a better place with whatever they're doing? Maybe not everybody, but I think most people, right? So I'm currently in the process of defining this better, in a better way. But basically, I want to support people who are doing things differently. I think that, for much of the world, the Western world especially, and, the States, we have a system that is not serving us anymore. And it's going to become more and more harmful as time goes on. And so I want to support people who are working on changing the system and improving it. So hopefully that will make sense when we get to our learning moment. But I wanted to go into our feel-good moment next, and I am going to read to you today for our feel-good moment from Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. Now, much of this book tells the story of a taxonomist named David Starr Jordan. In case you don't know, a taxonomist is a biologist that groups organisms into categories, and David specialized in naming and categorizing fish. So this passage that I'm going to read to you, it begins right after David Starr Jordan's entire life's work has been ruined by an earthquake. He had worked for 30 years in this field and had collected hundreds of fish floating in preservatives in jars that were labeled with the names he had given each fish. But when the earthquake hit, these jars were shattered and the labels were separated from the bodies of the fish. So what does David do? What does our careful man of science, who wants above all else to see the world for what it is, do? Does he hear what seems to be the obvious message of the earthquake, that entropy is the way of the world and no human can ever stop it? Nope. This is when the wonderful bastard, takes out his sewing needle and plunges it straight into our ruler's throat. Where did the idea come from? The idea to stitch a name directly to flesh. Did it arise somewhere deep within David, the needle surfacing from his boyhood memories of sewing rags into rugs? Did someone else suggest it? A colleague, a student, his wife? I don't know. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find the genesis story of the stitching technique. He was likely not the first taxonomist to think of sewing a label directly to a specimen. All we know is that he was the one who oversaw the procedural change in his own collection, and that his desperation to restore order to his fish is evident in the paper trail of requests he issues for help. He asks for the services of a carpenter, to put small slats along the front of the shelves containing bottles of specimens, for alcohol to preserve the fish specimens, for a steel wall and floor braces. The responses came back too slowly, though. The alcohol failed to arrive. The fish were lying there, vulnerable to the elements, beginning to desiccate and decay. So David turned to his men, his disciples on the mission of order, and, unable to think of anything else, commanded they arm themselves with hoses. The wreckage lay on the floor, kept wet with water by hoses manned day and night by Professors Snyder and Starks, comes one of the most beautiful sentences I have ever read, from one of the least likely sources, a catalog of the type of specimens of recent fishes in the Natural History Museum of Stanford University. Hoses manned day and night. Day and night. The sun rose and fell, and two of David's colleagues stood in galoshes, hoses aimed at a pile of flesh. Is this perhaps a glimpse of the true bones of persistence? Cold and uncertainty splashing in their faces, their prophet upturned outside their window, dust looming in the air, not sure how they'd ever put the mess back together, but at least for now, keeping things wet. David ran around, attending to worried parents, traumatized students, university accountants with their pencils aghast, all the while sending frantic messages to far-flung colleagues to send ethanol, day and night. He allowed the students to sleep outside on the lawn, as many of them were now terrified of walls, of shelter. Day and night. Friends and colleagues were lowered into the earth, dust to dust. The dust temporarily settling, as though in a temporary truce, then rising, swirling and rushing David's laboratory windows, bearing mites and putrescine and bacteria, threatening to begin its irreversible process of decay. The men watered and watered and watered. Maybe such unruly persistence is beautiful. Maybe it's not mad, after all. Maybe it is the quiet work of believing in good, of believing in a warmth which you know does not exist in the stars, to exist in the hearts of fellow humans. Maybe it's something like trust. So I think that is a really beautiful passage, and I think it's really incredible that Lulu Miller was able to find so much beauty in such an unlikely subject. So I am just going to leave that with you for our feel-good moment today and move right into our learning moment, which is going to come from a book called Art as Therapy, and this is by I'm trying to remember how to pronounce his name. It's a French author, Alain de Botton, I think is how you would say that name, and also John Armstrong. So we are going to read about an idea called Enlightened Capitalism. And before I begin, just a little summary of this book for context. This book is almost like a manifesto from these artists who are proposing their beliefs for the function that art should serve in society. And then at the very end, they provide, some opinions on how they think society should be changed and how this can be facilitated by art. And ever since I read this passage on Enlightened Capitalism, I was intrigued. So I'm just going to share it with you today. What we are aiming for is Enlightened Capitalism, a system within which businesses remain sufficiently attuned to economic reality to be profitable and to sustain and increase their own activities without needing outside support, but also stay focused on providing optimal goods and services. It means a business culture devoted to what is genuinely worthwhile and admirable, as well as to the many disciplines required to flourish in a competitive marketplace. At present, this usually sounds like a contradiction. We are haunted by the worry that it is impossible to do good things and make money at the same time. The worry goes to the very heart of our anxieties about capitalism. We fear that the economic system, which delivers so much productive efficiency, simply will not reward our nobler endeavors. There is certainly enough depressing evidence around that this may be the case, that when we try to do good things, we fail, and when we ignore taste, we succeed. In the mid-19th century, this issue was addressed head-on by an artist who was also an entrepreneur, William Morris. Like many of his serious contemporaries, Morris was dismayed by the way in which industrialization was taking more and more people away from craft employment, where they tended to produce beautiful and noble products, and onto the production lines of factories, where they tended to produce substandard and ugly ones. He sought to combat this by starting a business dedicated to turning out high-quality, beautiful furniture by hand in the traditional style, without the use of automated techniques, thereby also creating opportunities for satisfying well-paid work. The finest achievements of the various arts and crafts would be made available for all, and a workforce would have healthy and meaningful employment. Unfortunately, things didn't work out as planned. The business was moderately successful for a few years, but it never became a major competitor in the mainstream suppliers. It never employed more than a handful of people, and in the end it went bankrupt because there was simply not a large enough client base willing to pay a high enough price for the goods on offer. From a distance, Morris seems like the Jesus of good capitalism. He was commercially crucified because he was too good for this world. Meanwhile, the reverse fate seems often to attend those who don't care at all about quality and virtue. No one ever lost money by underestimating the taste of the public is a cynical but alarmingly plausible aphorism. The fate of Morris and Company, relative to the financial triumphs of Caesar's Palace and the Chadstone Shopping Center, may seem like proof that the market is evil, and that the only salvation lies in censorship and the provision of artificial incentives to the most noble producers. Caesar's Palace should be closed down by the taste police, while the government should subsidize the production of artisanal goat's cheese. Though charming as a daydream, a radical, large-scale intervention of this kind would lead to catastrophe. The value of the currency would collapse in the global money markets, taxation revenue would decline, and governments would be unable to service their debts. In any case, democratic political parties are themselves competitors for attention in the marketplace, and the major parties are necessarily more attuned to the values of Las Vegas than of Morris and Company. In any case, democratic political parties are themselves competitors for attention in the marketplace, and the major parties are necessarily more attuned to the values of Las Vegas than of Morris and Company. We should accept, without further nostalgic regret, that it is simply unfeasible to do away with the market. We need ways of improving it without the promise of any enlightened intervention. So I will leave it there for today, and because the authors of Artist Therapy, they don't necessarily go on to provide any actionable suggestions on how we can achieve a more enlightened version of capitalism. They're basically just calling for the readers to come up with some ideas, to figure this out. And personally, I think that is a good calling. I think that is a really good, life's purpose to pursue if you would like to do something like that. As I was talking about earlier with my graphic design agency and my goals, that is definitely the kind of business or organization that I am looking for. Those are the type of clients that I really, really want to help. So now it's time to get the mind in focus mode, and I want you to think about what your life's work might be. You might be working towards something monumentally impressive like Enlightened Capitalism or inventing a new technology. Or you might consider your life's work to simply be to spread as much love as you can, or both. I think it's nearly impossible to predict what, in the end, we'll look back and consider our life's work or our biggest contribution to the world really was. Life takes so many twists and turns that things almost never go according to plan. This is why I think it's valuable to have a life's purpose that's independent of these unpredictable factors. And showing love is one example of this kind of purpose. But it's also important to work towards the big goals, like enlightened capitalism or advances in technology and medicine. Maybe if you're working towards something like this, your life's work can be, as Lulu Miller said, the quiet work of believing in good, of believing in a warmth which you know does not exist in the stars to exist in the hearts of fellow humans. Maybe your purpose can be to practice unruly persistence while trusting yourself, trusting your fellow humans, and maybe even learning to trust the universe. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again tomorrow.